the agenda, I'll give a quick introduction for myself. Thank you so much for that. We'll talk about Agile. A lot of you guys probably know what IT service management is about, so we'll just touch on that very, very briefly. We'll talk about what it looks like to put Scrum concepts to work and what the difference is between Agile and Scrum. People confuse those two just like they do ITIL and ITSM. Use those interchangeably, so we'll talk about that as well. What we have done and what we continue to do is combine Agile with the continual service improvement model that's in the CSI book, and I'll show you guys kind of how we overlay the two and how we approach improvement projects. We'll talk about the certifications as well. Yeah, and any Q&A that we have, we'll actually do an exercise together to talk through the questions that you guys specifically have. So this is a little bit about me. I'm one of the principals at Beyond 20. We're a Tempe-based IT service management and project management consulting and training company here. So the name Beyond 20 actually comes from a Gartner research study where they looked at when mission-critical systems in organizations fail, only 20% of the time is it due to things like hardware, software, natural disasters. As probably many of you guys know, that 80% of the time, failures that take down critical, mission-critical systems, they were able to trace it back to failure in people and failure in process. So they didn't know what the process was, or the process was too bureaucratic, or everyone was allowed to be a cowboy and go and make the change that they wanted to. I'm seeing some nodding heads. Yeah, people make a change and they realize it, or they go, what is this going to impact? Probably nothing, until it does. So that's what we're passionate about, is fixing the people and the process stuff. So we do training, we do consulting, we do Scrum coaching, and all sorts of stuff like that. Okay, so what is Agile? We're going to do just a quick reminder of what Agile is, or for those of you that have never heard this term before, where it came from. So this is kind of how we've approached projects forever and ever and ever. First, you analyze exactly what it is that you're going to do all your analysis, then you do all of your planning, then once you're done with your planning, you do all of your designing. What else do they have here? Then you do your build, then you do your test, and then you do your deployment. What happens, though, in a project? Things change. Scope creep. Oh my God, scope creep is a huge thing. And people go, oh, wouldn't it be great if we just added this? And wouldn't it be great if we added this? And when you get to the end here, this isn't very conducive for going back and making changes. And so what Agile did and how it came to be is folks started saying there's probably a better way that we can approach this. Instead of approaching it this way, why don't we kind of turn it on its side and do little chunks of the work? Does that make sense? Let's break that stuff up. And what was interesting in the 1980s, a bunch of folks that were doing software development and doing it differently than most organizations, most traditional organizations, were found that they were being effective. And they all got together and said, okay, well, what are we doing that's different than everyone else? And they put together this whole manifesto. They got together in Utah and decided that they were going to write it down on paper, what they did differently. And this is the Agile Manifesto. I would encourage you guys, if you have not seen it before, to go and take a look at it. But this is what they said. They said, we proclaim that there's a better way to do, in this case, software development. And we proclaim that individuals and interactions, we want to focus on those things, and we value those things more than processes and tools. Kind of interesting. We value working software over having comprehensive documentation. You know, some of the reasons that people get a bad taste in their mouth over IT service management is they think, this just means we're going to have bureaucracy and we're going to have tons of documentation. And the ITIL folks, they love process. They love process. There's 25 of them in version 3. You know, and all the tool vendors here will say, you got to have a tool to help you do service management as well. What else they say here? The customer collaboration. We value that a lot more than contract negotiation, and we value responding to change. So scope creep isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we want to give ourselves a way to tackle it, and that's more important than adhering to a plan that never changes. So what they're saying here is there's value for the stuff over on the right, but if we adhere to Agile, we really care about the stuff over here on the left. Because what's interesting is we're trained to do the stuff over on the right. You know, when you take a foundations class, you go through like project management, PMP class, they will harp on all the stuff on the right. But what customers pay us for, what customers value, is the stuff over here on the left. That makes sense? So, there's lots of different ways and different methods that have kind of cropped up under this whole umbrella of Agile. Scrum is just the most popular. They did a survey, version 1 did a really interesting state of Agile survey where they looked at, okay, all the folks that say we're doing Agile, what are you doing? And they said about 55% of folks or different organizations said that they were doing Scrum. And Scrum is just a method by which you can do Agile. So they took these like pie in the sky, yeah, we value people and collaboration, all that stuff, and said, okay, well, what does that actually mean? Let's come up with kind of a recipe book for how you would implement some of this stuff. And that's where Scrum came to be. And so what Scrum talks about is that, yeah, you want to have all these requirements, and scope creep is not necessarily, like we said, a bad thing, but we want to put them into what's called a backlog. So we have this running backlog that's prioritized of all the things that we want to do. So if you're thinking about ITIL, what we've done is what we do with customers is we say, okay, let's take that CSI register, all the stuff you want to do, all the processes you want to implement or improve, all the services that you want to improve, all that stuff, that's great, let's capture it, but let's put it in a backlog and let's prioritize it, and then let's start tackling that stuff a little bit at a time. And so that's what the sprint backlog is. Then what you do is you figure out, okay, how often do we want to be delivering things? And Scrum recommends that you come up with these things called sprints, which is just a chunk of time, and you go either, let's say, minimum of a week to a maximum of a month, and deliver something every time. There's this whole idea that you need to come up with potentially shippable product. So maybe it means we want to, let's say if we're trying to build a service catalog. Okay, well maybe the catalog itself might take us 6 months to build a robust service catalog that we can make available to customers. But maybe in 2 weeks, we come up with an initial list, or we come up with a template that we can start filling out. So every, let's say 2 weeks, if we've got a 2-week sprint that's repeated, every 2 weeks we have something that we can show our customer. You know, what this does is it keeps that stakeholder excitement, so they're not waiting 6 months for a service catalog. They get something now, and you can talk about it, and you can pull it apart and say, what do you think? Do you like this? Do you not like this? And then you spend the next 2 weeks building on that, and what's called iterating on that, making it better, making it more robust. So by the end of the 6 months, you have something really, really cool that customers are on board with, they've been involved with, and people are still excited at the end of 6 months. Does that sound like maybe a better way to do it than to run off and then come back and people be like, wow, I hate your catalog, it's terrible. So that's essentially what you're doing is there's this role called a product owner that's managing and grooming, they call it grooming this whole backlog of stuff. And they work with the team, the folks that actually are going to be building this or doing the work, and we say, okay, what are those items that we can actually tackle in that next week or that next 2-week block? And then you let the team go off and figure out how they're going to do it, let them do the work. That's the the time that's spent in that sprint. And then at the end of that sprint, you say, let's get everybody together and let's talk about it. Let's get feedback around it. And there's a couple of different meetings that you can do at the end of that sprint. There's one that everybody comes and sees exactly what you have. And then there's another meeting, a retrospective that they call it, that you get together with the team and say, how did that go? What can we do that's better? And so you're not only delivering stuff, but you're also talking about process. And you're talking about what can we put on our list of action items so that we start to get better as a team over time. So you're not just delivering stuff, you're improving the dynamics of the team. All right, so I took some pictures of stuff that we do. One of the things that you'll find is when you start implementing more Agile and Scrum, one of the concepts is that stuff becomes a lot more visible. And so this is just a picture that we took from one of our training classes, but basically over on the left, these are all the requirements, all the stuff that you want to do. And it can be really messy at the beginning. You'll have a product backlog that's just kind of like a hot mess of all different stuff from all different people, and then you start to organize it. You can start to say, okay, in each of our sprints, what is the big goal? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And then you get into the very specific stuff for each of the sprints, and say, okay, here's our goal for that sprint. Let's talk through exactly what it is that we're going to do, what's in progress, and what's done. So at any point in time, you have a real-time assessment of where you guys are. And so what I did over here was just do a very quick, let me draw this a little differently. We actually do this on above each of our desks in the office, and I took a picture of what this looks like. This is my task board. Got a lot of stuff. When I took that picture, I had a lot more stuff on the left than I did on the right. But I look at, okay, what is it that I'm going to accomplish for the week? And so you just get some painter's tape. It's really, really simple. And you get some Post-it notes. And that's all you need, really. So you make this big H with painter's tape. On the left is everything that is on my list of tasks that I have to get done. And we break them up to stuff that you can get done in a day. And you start over on the left. That's the stuff that's not started, or the stuff to do. The stuff across the top of the H, that's the stuff that's in progress. And what's fascinating is this so works on myself and others. It's so satisfying to take something from the left, put it up to the top, and then put it over to the right. You're just like, yay, me, this is awesome. It's amazing, I swear to God, to like be able to physically move something into your done pile. And so the stuff across the top of the H, that's the stuff that's in progress. The stuff over to the right, that's the stuff that's all done. And so at the end of the week, I can be like, look at all the great stuff I did. And you get excited, but then you also find that you're continually adding to the left. You're like, dang it, I did 10 things and I got 10 more added. But that's okay. It allows you to prioritize. It's a very tactile way to get work done. Below the H, or in the bottom of the H in the middle, what this is reserved for is stuff that's blocked. So anything that you can't make progress on, you throw it down here. And we have daily morning scrum calls. Every day, 15 minutes. That replaces all of our weekly meetings, these long meetings that are an hour. We no longer have hour-long meetings, period. We break them down to 15 minutes. And in the 15 minutes, we talk about, what did I accomplish yesterday? What am I going to accomplish today? And what's my stuff that's blocked? And you let other people know, hey, I'm not able to make progress on something. I need your help. And so you can get that stuff moved over to complete it. You guys doing this kind of stuff? Okay.
Yeah, but I have my own name for it.
What's that?
It was the rich method.
The rich method. Hey, I don't care.
I didn't even know I was doing it.
I don't care what you call it. You know, same with ITIL. We have customers that say, oh, we don't do IT service management. We're not allowed to talk about our IT service management. I'm like, call it whatever the heck you want. Call it process improvement. I don't care. Call it Rich's method. It's the whole hiding the peas in the potato, or the mashed potato stuff. However you're going to do it is totally fine. But yeah, so basically that's what we do. And it's really nice because anybody can walk up to your desk and see exactly what's going on. You know, there's no question as to what is our SMO doing? What's our service management office doing? What is our ITIL team doing? You can see that we're making visual progress. You know, and any organization, if you can say, hey, in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to have something to show you guys, that's huge. I'm going to have data to show you guys on what we're doing with IT service management and that we're making this organization better. That's compelling. Yeah, absolutely.
So you just said, I can show you something. So that's all it is. It is not necessary to be in production. That's what you mean, right?
It's what they call potentially shippable product. Yes. So it may not necessarily be a release every time, but it's some sort of progress. Whether it be a prototype, a document, a something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great question. Yeah.
So you said that your chart there is about a day's worth of work.
So we look at each of these tasks. This is kind of how we do it. We look at this and say, I could get this done in a day. Because what happens is a lot of times we look at these projects that are huge, but you want to break them down. It's the whole
Right.
eating of the elephant. You want to break it down into little things that's actually achievable in a short period of time.
And then what happens if you do have a task that would take you, let's say, 3 to 5 days?
Break it up.
You would break that task up into smaller, okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can always break a big task into small tasks. And what I found is that when you have the big tasks, it's really easy to let that intimidate you and scare you and be like, oh my God, this is too big, and dread working on it. But if you just take a small little chunk, you can do that. You're like, oh yeah, this small little piece, easy. I can get that done all day.
And then you're
So you're
color
making progress.
coordinated according to maybe project or?
Oh, we're not, no.
No?
It's whatever Post-its are closest.
You have
You
black ones?
can, that would be a good system.
You have black Post-its, you know?
Depends on my mood, I guess, I don't know. No, I just, myself personally, I just grab whatever's closest, so, yeah. Yeah, it's funny though, you say that because one of the other girls in my office, it looked very romper room. Like she had really bright, like primary color ones, and they were just all over the place. It looked kind of like she was manic. But no, I mean, we're making progress every day. Yeah.
Yeah, I did have a question. So you could have fun with your colleagues to move them in the morning before they get there, right? All over to the right.
That's so mean.
No,
That's so
my
mean.
question was, I don't use this method. I have my to-do list, right?
Yeah.
And this is really good. I've seen people use something like this. But what you're doing here, is that just, could that be one project and you break it up? Or what happens if you have multiple projects? Would you have 4 of those scattered on your board?
You certainly could, yes. So we work on a lot of different projects for a lot of different customers. So we use a product called Trello that we like pretty well, and that one we organize by client. So, you know, you asked if the Post-its were different colors. You could have Post-its that are a different color for each customer.
Okay.
Absolutely,
Makes sense.
yeah. And we use lots of different kinds of techniques. I brought another picture of one that I think is fantastic. I've seen project teams use it to look at risks on a project. It's a really creative way to figure out risks. And so what you do is you draw a boat, that's a really pretty boat, way nicer than I could draw one. It looks like people could actually fit in it. And what you do is you just draw a boat and you say, okay, what are the anchors that are holding us down? We actually do this at the beginning of an IT service management implementation too. We say, you know, because we're trying to figure out the culture of the organization and what could torpedo the project. And so we say, give me one idea for a Post-it, and just let everybody just think through what are those things that could hold this project back? What are the risks that could keep us from being successful? And what you explain to folks that you want them to do is, well, everyone here has put the Post-it notes on the boat, which is totally wrong. But no, you put them in the water. I'm just kidding. You put them in the water. Typically what I've seen is people put them in the water and you say, okay, make the stuff that's like really the big risks, the really big anchors, put that towards the bottom. Like what can really pull this speedboat down and keep it from being successful? And you have a really interesting conversation around risks to a project. And then you can have a more positive conversation and say, okay, well, what are we going to do to make sure that these risks don't ever happen? And it's just kind of a creative way to get people thinking about risks in a different way. I've also seen, we do a lot of like requirements gathering at the beginning of projects. And we draw this tree, whatever kind of tree you want to draw. And it helps you figure out your requirements. So the stuff in the roots, people can put all their requirements that are essential, that you have to get out. So the stuff that's in the top of the tree, the stuff that's more optional, and it really just kind of helps you visually think through, okay, what needs to happen, not only in this project, but maybe this sprint as well. So there's a really good website called Innovation Games. It's pretty fantastic. It gives you lots of ideas on how to start implementing some of these Agile and Scrum concepts. Highly, highly recommend that website. All right, so in the spirit of Scrum, I'm going to hand out some Post-its. If you guys would help me, break these packets up a little bit so everybody gets them. And from here, yeah, if you guys could just help make sure everybody gets some Post-its.
Thank you.
Anybody need Post-its? Got some more here. Some more? Hammers wall? All right. Everybody need some? Yeah. Look, you guys self-organizing. I like it. All right, so what I want you guys to do is any questions that you guys have about service management or Agile or Scrum, if you got like, put one question per Post-it, and if anyone needs pens, we can get you some pens as well. But any questions that you guys have, I want you to take like the next couple of minutes and just think that through. And once you've got questions, let's put them over here on the left-hand side. Yeah? Make sense?
Can you say it one more time?
Yeah, so any questions that you have about Agile or Scrum or IT service management, or just questions about life in general, whatever. Let's put them over here, yeah? And then we'll start tackling some of them kind of throughout the rest of the presentation. Which I think we have about how many minutes left, like -2?
-2? No, we're fine.
Yes. All right. So take a couple minutes to do that. Anyone need a pen? All right, I'm gonna grab you guys some pens.
Yeah, about 20 minutes.
Oh, you have 20 minutes. Oh, fantastic.
All right, you're safe.
Pens, pens. All right. Yes.
Just stick them up there.
Stick them on up there.
What do you have to write in list? That was the question you asked. And I said, we know where it is.
Wow, you guys have a lot of questions. I love it. Yeah, you
Yeah, a
are.
whopping 15 minutes at the answer.
That's fantastic.
How many you can cover?
Well, if you guys want to hang out till like 8, I promise to get through all of them.
Does your wall look like that sometimes?
Some days my wall does look like this, and it makes me sad. But that's okay. That's okay. So what we would actually do in real life is these questions we would treat kind of like requirements, and then we group them in what's called affinity clusters, so that the things that are similar, we kind of all group them together, and then we start to prioritize, okay, these are the things that are most important. These are the things that if we delivered this to a customer, they would be most happy with. So one of the things that you'll see in Agile projects is that's different than like a traditional, what they call waterfall, which I was showing you guys before, where you do, all the analysis, and then it trickles down to, all of the, I forget what the next one was, requirements gathering, and then we do all of the builds and all that kind of stuff. The thing that's different is in the traditional project, and I've seen a lot of project managers, we struggle with this, is that last part of the project can be super risky. What an Agile project says is, let's take the stuff that's most risky but also most important, and let's tackle that stuff first. Get that out of the way, and then that takes the risk out of the project. So what we would do in a product backlog is say, okay, what's the stuff that's highest value? Let's rise that to the top. and then let's put that into our sprint, and then that eventually makes our task board. What I had you guys do is actually just throw everything in my task board, so it would make me super sad. But yeah, let's tackle this in a second. Okay, that's super huge. Wow, my brain exploded a little bit. Okay, so this is how we look at, or how I look at Agile when you put it against ITIL's continual service improvement model. Have you guys seen the CSI model before?
Oh, yeah.
Some of you very, very familiar. Okay, so I'm going to talk through it briefly. I don't know if you guys can see that very well, but we talk about in our ITIL Foundations class this whole CSI model. When you go to implement any sort of improvement, these are the questions that you want to be answering as you go through it. The first question is, what is our vision? You know, is it just to do ITIL? Because that's kind of a crappy vision. A better vision is, let's figure out what it is that we're trying to improve as an organization, what goals we're trying to meet, and make those goals very tangible, very attainable for folks so they know when they're done. The stuff over on the right, these are the things that answer each of the questions in your 6-step model. So you want to have a clear business vision, mission to help you answer what is my vision. Like, we want to become ISO 20K certified by the end of next year. Maybe that's your vision. Or we want to decrease the mean time to resolve incidents. We want to cut that in half by the end of the year. Whatever that vision is for you guys, you want to define that first. Then what you do is a baseline assessment to figure out, okay, where are we now? Where are we today? Come up with targets along the way to say, okay, well, where is it that we want to be? Maybe our goal is 2 years out, but we can at least come up with a goal for where we want to be next quarter, and maybe the quarter after that, and the quarter after that. So you come up with targets that tell you, where you want to be along the way. You come up with a service or process improvement plan to say how it is that you're going to get there, essentially what your training plan is to get you from A to B. Come up with good metrics and measurements to understand, did we actually achieve what we set out to do? And then the last question over here on the left, I think a lot of times organizations, they do all the heavy lifting and they forget about this last question, how do we keep that momentum going? So once we cut the mean time to resolve incidents in half, how do we not go back to the way things used to be? Or how do we not be okay with the new status quo? How do we keep pushing ourselves to get better? Because you've got to do that as an organization. So these are the 6 steps of the CSI model. How we overlay Agile on top of this is here. So we come up with this vision of where we want the organization to go. We do an assessment of where are they now. Then these targets help us fill up our product backlog of all the things that we want to do. And then this plan, we break the plan up into, we do 2-week sprints, but you guys can do this however you want. You can do week sprints, you can do 4-week sprints, you can do month sprints, or that is 4 weeks. Okay, duh. But yeah, so you break it up into sprints, and so, okay, the how we get there, we can do that in 2 weeks. And what's really fascinating about picking up whatever the size sprint is that you choose, for us 2 weeks works pretty well, is you get into this rhythm. That it's all about delivering something. Every 2 weeks, people can count on you, no matter what, you will deliver them something that will move the needle forward. So you do your sprints, then you look at, during these sprint review meetings, you measure, how are we doing against our baseline? And you can, even if the needle moves a little bit, you're making progress and you can show your stakeholders. I mean, as a stakeholder myself in some projects, if someone can show me data as to how we're progressing, that's huge. And if they can do it in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, that's tremendous. Instead of, some of these projects I've seen that for IT service management, they go on for years and they kind of have a slow death because there's no data to show progress. So we do that in the sprint review. And then the how you keep the momentum going is by doing a retrospective, by doing future sprint planning, so making sure that we have really good sprints that are solid going forward, and then we reprioritize the backlog, rinse and repeat. Questions on that? If your question is already up there, I'm not handling it. Okay, so let's tackle some of these questions. Let's try it with the time we've got left. Ooh, this is a good one. I'm just going to randomly pick these. Okay, how have you gotten people excited about Scrum? I think the thing that is most exciting for folks is that they get data now. And when you can show that you're making progress, like I was saying before, that's the biggest thing. I've also seen when you get people trained in Scrum, I mean, take this with a grain of salt because we do Scrum training, we do ITIL training, so I think that that's super important. But when you get people trained and they actually get a chance to go through it, like for example, we do 2-day Certified Scrum Master training. And we treat the class as if it's a Scrum project. And we break the 2 days into 4 sprints, so each 4-hour block is a sprint. And you go through and you see what happens when you don't get all the stuff done that you hope to in a sprint. You fail at Agile because that often happens. Everyone thinks, oh, Agile, Scrum, it's perfect, let's do it. And then there's pain and there's suffering because you're not used to working like that as a company. And it sucks. It sucks a lot sometimes. But it takes a good couple months to get really good at it. What unfortunately a lot of organizations do is they have pain. This is true with IT service management, this is true with Agile, this is true with any sort of improvement you're trying to do. A lot of people feel the pain and then they don't go past the pain. You know, and with Agile and Scrum, you have to go a couple of months into it and go through some of that pain and suffering to get the value out of it that you hoped. It's kind of like when you run. My husband is a triathlete, and so I thought when I married him, I'm like, that's cool, that's his thing, I will never do that ever. And then he got me running, and I still hate running. But the first few weeks, you're like, this is the worst thing I've ever experienced. I will never do this. And it's not until you get past that hump that you realize, certain days don't suck so bad. Same thing with any sort of improvement, you know? You go through it, you're like, this is terrible. Why are we doing Agile in the first place? Things have gotten worse. You know, you've got to get out of that valley and get better. But I mean, for me, the biggest thing is that you take risks out of projects, you get value immediately. You can deliver products way more quickly than you would ever otherwise be able to do. It's not necessarily a way to save costs, but it's a way to deliver a lot more of higher quality faster. And that goes for ITIL initiatives as well. Would you say that's kind of done? Did that kind of answer that question?
No.
It did a lot? Sweet, yes, all right. Oh, that's interesting. Have you ever had a block task that you had to give up on, not worth doing? Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about creating business value, and if you look at that again and say, this isn't creating value for us, get rid of it. Period, shouldn't be doing it. I'm going to assume I answered that question. If not, see me later. What happens if a sprint runs over 30 days? So, you could have a long sprint. You could say, we're going to do sprints every 6 weeks, and that's fine. But if you've decided that your sprint is 30 days, a sprint is a sprint is a sprint. You don't mess with the time in the sprint. And if you don't get stuff done by the end of that 30 days, and your 30 days is the sprint, then that stuff goes back on the product backlog, and you tackle it another sprint. You don't carry it forward and say, well, we've got a little bit more left. No, because you might have other priorities that are higher than that unfinished task. If it's not done, it goes back on the backlog.
What if it was something that you had to get done before the next task?
Something that had to get done?
Yeah, it's contingent on
Dependencies, yeah.
So you would make a note of that in the backlog, that this has to happen before that. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to allow people to let stuff slip and be like, I'm almost done, I'm almost done, I'm almost done. No, you don't get to do that. You get it done by the end of the sprint or it's not done.
So it goes back to the backlog and then you pull it out again and pull it through to another sprint?
Yep.
And if it goes over again, what do you keep, you know?
Then you start having a conversation with your team.
And then you
Hey
reassess.
guys, why aren't you getting stuff done by the end of the sprint? What's the problem?
All right.
What is the problem? And there's actually a second role. So there's the role of a product owner that grooms the stuff that's in that product backlog, and they should be the champion for the business that says, here's the stuff that's really important that needs to get delivered.
Right.
There's this other role called a Scrum Master who's really concerned with the process. So think product owner, focused on the product
Right.
that you're producing. Scrum Master is focused on the process. And so what their whole job is, or one of their jobs, is to remove any impediments that the team has. And so it's their role to very diplomatically have a conversation with the team as to why are we not getting this done? You guys committed that this was achievable within 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever that may be. Is there anything that I need to remove from your plates? What's going on? Mhm. Yeah. All right, let's see what else we got here. Some of these are like a whole day's worth of conversation. Like, oh, here's a good one. Okay, what are the secrets to managing Scrum stand-ups? So again, it's important to have this Scrum Master. It's not required that they be at the daily stand-ups. But if they are at the daily stand-ups, one of their roles is to make sure that those stand-ups run efficiently and effectively. The goal of a stand-up in the morning is not to solve problems. It's just to say, what did I do the previous day? What am I going to do today? And where am I blocked? You're not supposed to say, okay, well, let's figure out what's blocked and let's get it all worked out. No. It's a conversation for outside of that stand-up. So people should be talking about those three things, and the Scrum Master is tasked with making sure that that happens as it should. It should not last more than about 15 minutes. If they are, something's probably wrong with that meeting. They're also in charge of making sure that people take those stand-up meetings seriously. You've gone away now from having these long meetings to these very short meetings that are supposed to be very, very effective and help you know not only where the project is at any point in time, but to make sure that you're making progress. So a Scrum Master, again, very diplomatically, needs to make sure that folks show up on time, that they are prepared with those three things. All right, and we're getting low on time. How close are we?
Just about 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes, sweet, okay. All right, I'm just gonna randomly. Oh, this is okay. This is okay. Why would I say that? I don't know.
Easy one.
Yeah, this is an easy one. I can answer this without looking like a fool. How does ITIL fit in with IT service management? How are they related to one another? Oh, this is a great question. So there's a lot of confusion as to ITIL, ITSM. Everyone uses those two things together. Those are very different words. ITIL stands for the Information Technology Infrastructure Library. It's the books. It's like saying encyclopedias. So you're not really, there's no such thing as being like ITIL compliant, and you don't really do ITIL. What the focus of those ITIL books is that acronym IT Service Management. IT Service Management is what we practice. It's about developing capabilities as an organization that's unique, that's value add, so that we bring real value to our customers. So ITIL, think books. IT Service Management is what we do. It's what we try to achieve as an organization. All right, yes, I answered that one. Is Scrum just like a legacy PM with milestones? No, it is totally, totally different. It is a complete change in how you look at projects altogether. Unless I misunderstand the word legacy completely. Anyone care to clarify what that question is a little bit more? What they mean by legacy?
You got it right, legacy, just the way that PM has been done for years, and you create major milestones that, are tracks that you have to meet.
Yeah,
Waterfall.
it's totally different. It's waterfall turned on its side. It's totally different. In fact, what's kind of ironic, I learned this in a recent Scrum class, is that PMI, the group that came up with the PMBOK, they do Scrum completely internally to develop all their software and things like that, because it's a faster, better way to get work done. Absolutely. Oh, okay, hello. I've just got a few more questions to go through here. Just a few more. So who owns Agile / the project charter? That's an interesting question. So Agile as the discipline, I'm assuming, and the project charter as like what the team is charged to do. I'm going to make up what I think these questions are about. So the way that I look at this, the project charter is what are we going to accomplish as a project or as a team, and to me that's the product owner. The product owner has the voice of the business. What is it that we're going to accomplish? And they're going to manage that and give clarification to the team as to why are we doing this in the first place. And then who owns Agile? I'm going to assume that means as a process, and that would be the Scrum Master. So one cares about the product, which you would talk about in the charter. One cares about the process, and that's the Scrum Master. Wait, did I make that up? No, I said that right. I said that right, okay. This one's a really big question I will get to later, another day. Why is Scrum more popular of all the Agiles? I don't know the answer to that. I think just because, okay, here's my personal opinion. Certified Scrum Master sounds really good because you are the master of Scrum. I think also the folks that came up with Scrum have done a really good job of communicating what that involves, but there's a lot of other stuff. There's extreme programming, there's Kanban, there's, oh my God, there's 15, 16 different methods that fit under the umbrella of Agile. Scrum just has kind of risen to the top over the years. And there's a whole alliance around Scrum called the Scrum Alliance. Go figure. There's also an Agile Alliance, a Scrum Alliance, the equivalent of what IT Service Management has with ITSM and that kind of thing. So, PMI for project management. And what else?
Safe.
Oh, and there's SAFE too. Yeah, SAFE is a really interesting thing. So, one of the struggles that organizations have had in the past, or currently have, with this whole Scrum and Agile movement is it's really great for a team. It's really good for, for a team of, let's say, 6 to 10 people, but how do you scale that across the entire enterprise? Let's say you're a multinational company. How do you then do that across the enterprise? And so there's a method called SAFE, the Scaled Agile Framework for the Enterprise, that shows you how you do it at the project level, the program level, the portfolio level, so it all rises up and you have visibility all the way down.